If you nail the execution, it can turn even the most simple meal into something quite special, but that's actually not a very easy thing to do. There's almost always something that can be improved. So if you ever sit down to a meal and each component has been executed perfectly, then take a second to thank the cook, especially if it's your mother. Here's a familiar case study: steamed broccoli, steamed white rice, and pan-seared chicken breast. I'm going to walk through how to execute each component in an attempt to demonstrate how even the most simple meal can be delicious with proper attention to technique. To make it as easy as possible, I'm going to run through this as a single serving before making things more challenging by upping the portions into something you might serve as a family meal. I've salted the chicken overnight, which is a crucial step to prevent dry chicken. Even 30 minutes will make a big difference. To butterfly the chicken breast, hang the edge of your knife handle off the cutting board. This gives you clearance so you can get the blade on an even horizontal plane. Keep your knife as flat as possible and try to make the cut in 1 or 2 passes to avoid creating little flaps from repetitive cuts. At this point, you can whack it with a mallet to flatten it, but if you've done a decent job, you can skip that. I'll still give it a few quick whacks with the spine of my knife and run the flat of the blade over it to even things out. Do your best to create a uniform thickness and set it aside. The broccoli is pretty simple to prep. Trim off the base of the crown and then snap off the individual florets. Cut the florets down to your preferred size, but try to be consistent so they all cook at roughly the same rate. Trim the base of the florets if you want and set the broccoli aside. I normally would never do this. Steaming stovetop white rice can actually be quite tricky, but here's a very reliable stovetop method for white basmati. Measure out the rice, rinse or don't rinse, but I like to rinse it 3 times and then strain out all the sitting water to get an accurate water measurement. Dump the strained rice into an appropriate sized pot, then measure out 1.5 times the amount of rice in cold water. Pour that in and crank the burner to high. Once it approaches a boil, kill the heat. The simmer should chill out after about a minute. Set on a tight-fitting lid and turn the heat back on to its lowest setting. Set a timer for 15 minutes and leave it alone until the timer goes. The rice is the slowest cooking component, so knock it out first and then move on to the chicken and broccoli. On the back burner, boil a pot of water for the broccoli, then start preheating the pan to sear the chicken. Pan selection is often overlooked, but it's very important. For the steamer basket, make sure you have enough room to steam the broccoli in a single layer. For searing the chicken, you want a heavy bottom skillet, something like a good stainless steel or cast iron. I'm using my thick gauge carbon steel pan, which I really like. Any thick pan needs quite a lot of time to heat up properly. I also like to use the largest zone on my electric stovetop because I really want the pan fully and evenly heated throughout. I can't stress this enough. If you've properly preheated your pan, it shouldn't be blazing on maxed out on your burner. It depends on your stove, but on mine I find that a medium-low setting of 3 or 4 for about 8 to 10 minutes gets me in that perfect zone for searing meat. Once it's good to go, toss in a bit of your cooking fat of choice and work it into the pan with a folded up paper towel. This is a great bit of insurance with cast iron and carbon steel. You're effectively forcing in a thin layer of fat before adding the fat proper. This double up method is a great way to prevent stick, and it doesn't hurt if you're going with stainless steel as well, especially because it's a great temperature indicator. You should start to see wisps of smoke, which is a good sign. If the fat smokes off aggressively, take the pan off the heat momentarily, let it cool down, and then put it back on. I had leftover clarified butter, which is an incredibly flavorful, decently high smoke point fat for searing, but neutral oil is obviously totally fine. And I'd recommend starting with a very healthy pool of fat. Chicken breast is very lean, it's got no fat to give, so this will really help facilitate even browning. Too little fat and you'll end up with a spotty, uneven sear. Lean proteins are going to absorb next to no fat or oil from the pan, so this is your permission to get a bit crazy. Lay the chicken down and press it into the pan, then totally leave it alone. Don't move it, don't flip it. That meat will cling to the pan on contact, and if you move it, you won't get the color you want. A thin piece of chicken like this is going to overcook if you try for a serious sear on both sides. So once it looks like it's about 60% of the way cooked, roughly 3 to 4 minutes, give it a flip. It should only take a minute or so on the back side, then pull it off and rest it while you finish the broccoli. With the water boiled and the broccoli prepped, this becomes really simple to pull off, and it can be done while the chicken is resting and the rice is finishing. Set the steamer basket of broccoli over the boiling water, put the lid on, and start a timer. Right about now is when the timer on my rice went off, and this here is really important. Kill the heat, but leave the pot of rice in place and try not to open the lid. Let it ride for at least 3 to 5 minutes on the residual heat from the burner. The nice part is you can leave it right there for a long time and it'll keep warm. Even 30 minutes to an hour is pretty safe, so if you're doing this for a lot of people, you can get it out of the way early. I'm quickly going to recap the whole rice cooking process, so pause here if you need a reference. Bring the rice up to a gentle boil, kill the heat, let it drop to a light simmer, stick the lid on, turn the heat to very low, set a timer for 15 minutes, kill the heat, and let it rest on the now off burner for 5 to 10 minutes, then open the lid. Start checking the broccoli for doneness around the 3-minute mark. You can use a cake tester to feel for a tiny bit of resistance, which will tell you that it's cooked through, but it still has a little bit of snap, often referred to as tender crisp in the vegetable world. Return the lid if it needs more cooking. You can also use a thin knife to check, and if it slides right through, get it off the heat right away because it's more than done. Immediately get that into a large bowl, season it with a bit of salt, and give it a toss. Okay, that's the whole meal for one person. I finished the broccoli with a bit of olive oil and flaky salt. I sliced up half the chicken to serve, but left the other half whole to retain heat. and serve the whole affair with a wedge of lemon. The clarified butter really adds a lot of flavor to the chicken, but besides that, I purposely left everything very plain, yet it's still an absolutely delicious plate of food because every component is well executed. But that's a plate for just one person, which makes execution as easy as it's ever going to get. Most people cooking at home for families are probably serving like 4 to 6 people, and just that bump poses a whole lot of questions for a basic dinner like this. How do you keep everything warm? Sometimes I like to load serving dishes or plates into a low oven. You also gotta decide if you wanna batch cook the chicken breast and keep each batch warm in the oven as they come out of the pan, or use multiple pans to speed up the process. The former is cleanlier but takes much longer, while the latter is quicker but can be very messy and chaotic. And do you even have enough burners to get everything done? Timing becomes more tricky, and even equipment selection can pose a problem. I had to whip out this massive steamer just to do the broccoli justice. There's a lot of things to consider. The list is probably endless. I just touched on a few quick ones. And usually I'm just flying by the seat of my pants, as I expect most home cooks are. That's kind of how you develop your intuition and your skill for cooking. So this is when it becomes almost impossible to keep up the standard that you've set for yourself when you're cooking for one. So yeah, I always really appreciate when someone serves me a home cooked meal. And if you ever manage to nail family dinner to perfection, then congrats, because that's pretty cool. And if you ever do it, I'll let you know it too. And no, I didn't nail this dinner. The broccoli was good, the rice was good, the chicken was inconsistent, a bit of a spotty sear on some pieces, some of it was a little overcooked, but still not bad for what looks like typical bodybuilder fare. Although I doubt they're pan frying their chicken in butter.